I think the biggest stakeholder in all of this is the facilities manager. They're the teams that are on the ground, able to drive that change up the chain within their business and down the chain into their supply chain. They're the guys that are lovingly caring for these buildings and the product that's in them. I think they are critical to this change, and the reuse of product starts with the correct procurement of the product in the first place. Design for reuse, procure for reuse, buy for reuse. Have the end of life of the product in mind at the start of your journey with that product. And then, we're forward planning the solution effectively.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you're ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. In today's episode, host Sam Beere, COO of JEB Group, joins his colleagues Andy Russell, Group Strategy and Growth Director, and Lim Shu Xin, Regional Sustainability, ESG, and Carbon Specialist, to discuss the importance of circularity in the real estate and construction industry. The conversation emphasizes the critical role of facility managers in driving sustainable practices and the misconception that circular economy practices are complex and costly. They also explore the barriers and opportunities to adopting circular practices, as well as the importance of early adoption, collaboration, and the potential for business opportunities by rethinking waste as a resource. Now, let's get into it.
So welcome. Thanks for joining us today for what we hope will be an engaging and exciting discussion. My name is Sam Beere, COO of JEB Group, and I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Russell and Shu Xin Lim. And together we'll be exploring the concept of circularity and the issue of waste that's generated within the real estate and construction industry. A disturbing fact, globally, the construction industry generates an estimated 1.3 billion tons of waste annually. Today's discussion will look at how we view waste and ways to change perception, to reimagine and rethink its value as a resource. But before we get started, I'd like to hand over to Andy and Shu Xin so they can introduce themselves.
I'm Andy Russell. I'm the Group Strategy and Growth Director at JEB. I'm based in Hong Kong. I have a passion for sustainability, and I've spent 25 years in the office furniture industry.
Hello everyone, my name is Shu Xin. I am a Malaysia-born Singaporean who now also works in Hong Kong with JEB Group as their regional sustainability, ESG and carbon specialist. On my day-to-day role, I do raise awareness of sustainability, be it internally as well as externally, and specialize in carbon footprinting. And it's definitely excited to be here to share more about some of the innovative practices that we do in our organization and in different industries that I've worked so far.
Thanks both. That's awesome. So let's dive in and get the conversation going. So there's three main topics that we're going to cover today. First one is that there is a common misconception about circular economy, i.e. that it's complex, it's costly, and it's not always applicable to industry. Number two is there are barriers and opportunities to adopt a circular economy or a circular approach within business. What are they and how can businesses benefit? And then finally, we'll wrap up with some strategies of how we adopt, how we engage and influence our stakeholders to be able to take circular practice forwards. So why don't we start and look at understanding the principle? Guys, why don't you explain what is circularity?
I think at its core, circularity is a necessity. I think, some people that say unless we go fully circular, the game is over for the planet. I think maybe that's taking things a bit too far, but it's definitely one of the key methods to the world achieving a faster route towards net zero. The circular economy is an amazing business model. It's a growth model around the world. It's estimated it could generate 4.5 trillion American dollars to the economy. And, it's a regenerative process by design. It's breaking the linear manufacturing model, the take waste, make waste model, and is really just trying to always look at reuse before any other method.
Yeah, to chime in on that, there's actually a statistic by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which states that approximately 80% of furniture goes into the landfill, And I think this statistic really brings back the point that waste and furniture waste is such a significant problem of our industry. And I would presume much of that actually is occurring in where we are at today, which is Asia Pacific.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, we obviously have a better handling and understanding of circularity. Thanks for helping confirm. But let's start to, if we have a look at some of the challenges perhaps that we have with circularity and how we can assist. So there is this misconception about it holds people back to be able to embrace change, is that circularity essentially is expensive.
Hmm.
The willingness to pay for those sustainable services or practices, perhaps because they're undervalued or they're not seen as a priority. And I think we've had experience, as Shu Xin, we've had experience within projects that we run, historically more so, that if the budget isn't very clear at the beginning of a project, then being able to ensure sustainable practices or circular practices are actually embedded within the project cycle. Now, the good news is, as we're seeing as this develops and we start to catch up, if you like, with other parts of the world, it's at the forefront of clients' minds. It's at the forefront of the stakeholders who are involved in the process to ensure that we can make sure that circular processes or circular strategies are actually embedded within the process of delivering projects. Wonder what you think on that, Shu Xin.
Yeah, echoing on what you have mentioned, I think cost is really something that is in the forefront of a lot of people's mind, and everything in the world has a price tag, which is true. But there is a Chinese saying that says like 把钱花在刀刃上, which in that translate to spending money where it matters the most. So in the knife situation, it's actually on the blade. So coming back to sustainability, I think it's spending money where it's relevant. And for us in JEB Group, something that is very close to our belief is getting our methodology as well as data third-party verified. So in the situation of ISOs, we have recently completed both the ISO 14064-1 and 67, which are both on carbon footprinting of our organization footprint as well as products. So getting this verification by third party, it really adds on an extra layer of credibility for our stakeholders like clients and also organizations to trust in what we are doing and allowing us to continue to drive that sustainable conversations with them so that we are not talking about just on the layer of cost, but also seeing how sustainability can be an investment for the future.
I think you've raised some really good points there, Shusin. I think it's also sometimes difficult to translate the value. I mean, you've talked about practices or methods for us to be able to show that, like the ISOs, like the standards. Andy, I'm wondering what your view is on why you think it's so difficult or perceived to be so difficult to embed circularity within industry or convince business leaders, if you like, to take it on board.
Yeah, I mean, we encounter this every day, the comments around price. And I think there's 2 points. There's the ultimate price that we pay for not moving in the right direction, which is the price to the environment, to the planet, to our futures. But I think it's just easier to buy new product. It's what we've always done. We've run procurement exercises, we've run tender exercises, etc. And there's a tried and tested way to run a fit out or to redevelop space. We have to just try and think differently. We have to try and take time to step back and onboard different ways of thinking. You have all the stock typically within your own estates. It's the use of that product. It's the engaging with bodies with companies that can support you in that journey to circularity. You can take an old office chair that's 5, 6, 7, 8 years old and literally turn it back to nearly new and give it another 20 years of life, um, impacting your bottom line and impacting your business's carbon footprint. If you look at the IFRS guidelines, the reporting of carbon on balance sheets, this is becoming something that's critical to certainly listed businesses around the globe. Another significant thing driven by government globally to try and make an impact to this change. But cost, as Susan quite rightly put, is you have to think about what you're spending your money on, prioritize it effectively. You can get amazing outcomes with what you've already got, and it can look really different to how it maybe looks just now with the right team on board.
Yeah, I think you raised some really cool points there on exactly how we perceive or how we look at the items we have around us in our inventory. And definitely there's a link between assets, depreciation, and then value, if you like, or a
Mm.
physical value. I think it really challenges us, circularity, to view waste and resources in a different way. So keen to talk a little bit more about those challenges and how we overcome them. And Andy, wondered what your thoughts were on the pillars which are involved in making those decisions or impacting the ability to make that change.
Yeah, I think the kind of three pillars that make up the triangle: government, finance, and industry, are the key driving factors behind helping business, helping economies to drive this change and guiding the route to that change. Industry is doing a great job. We, 10 years ago would tender for office fit out projects, and the tick box exercises of sustainability would always be there, but really at the end of the day it came down to price. That got put to one side. Really, since the turn of the pandemic, we started to see that being much more important to businesses, driving change down through their supply chains, creating phenomenal tenders, phenomenal from the perspective of the environment, that really made suppliers step up and change the way that they work. Finance also making big leaps. IFRS guidelines, a huge step in the right direction. Green loans, green finance, dictating to businesses that they have to make positive impacts to be able to access that money at better rates. Policy, government policy around the world is different. Some governments are a long way ahead. I lived in Scotland and the UK for nearly all of my working career until the last 4 weeks in Hong Kong. And, it's a very advanced system. Circularity is really taking off there. It's creating employment, it's creating GDP growth. If you think about what drives us as people, it's capitalism. As businesses, it's capitalism, it's growth.
Mm.
I think circularity, there's a misconception that is, well, it needs to stop everything and we just need to reuse everything that we had before. It's not. It creates a huge economic model that can employ huge amounts of people and upskill maybe disadvantaged people. I remember back to trying to find a French polisher once. I'm sure in my dad's youth that would have been an easy task. There would have been lots in the city. Now they're like hen's teeth to find. So those kind of skills build the circular economy, and it gives us that opportunity to take a step back, literally in time, to what we used to do, to be able to take a big step forward and make a massive impact in the process.
You pick
Nicely
up on
summarized.
yeah, and then you pick up on a nice point there actually, which is something we forget, is those types of skills, French polisher being one of them, kind of a lost or an art that's slowly disappearing. But reality is they would become more valuable now, and that comes back to the discussion and opportunities, and where people essentially have the opportunity to create maybe new businesses or develop new practices to be able to benefit from what is a huge driving business. And if you like, overall as an opportunity,
Yeah.
sustainability or circularity is a huge opportunity. Shu Xin, sorry, you were about to talk and share something else as well.
Yeah, I think the point on social is something that I personally, or otherwise a lot of people in the sustainability world, tend to slightly forget about. And we focus so much on environment or carbon footprinting, but there's really the pillar on community involvement or local communities, to empower them and see how we can support their development is also rather important in this conversation. And of course, not forgetting the governance conversations about how organizations needs to be more structured with the right leadership that can drive sustainable changes down the entire organization. Yeah.
Yeah, a really cool point, and something I'd just like to kind of reiterate there. I think change starts at the top or within leadership, and we need to get to those leaders and to, if you like, educate or share more around how they can make change within their organizations individually. That really sets up the impact to change a working culture. Something that we found beneficial in the organization is champions within the company and experts, employing specific experts to be able to come into the business and share more about sustainability or circularity, because it helps to translate the myth of some of the science that's out there. And Shu Xin, you mentioned it earlier about the calculations around carbon and things like that.
Mhm.
there's so many of us, myself, I put on the list and say, I'm not an expert in this field, but there are people who are experts, and they're very passionate about getting involved with corporate and organizations to be able to help them. So I think it's about connecting into people as well and
Mm.
trying to work that way to bring people into the business.
Yeah,
So,
coming back to the point on carbon footprinting, I think there's a misconception that many people would assume that it's rather complicated or overwhelming because of data and analysis. But factually, there are a lot of frameworks and tools out there that are readily available, and many people can slowly start to grasp the understanding of life cycle, life assessments, as well as like ISOs or numbers, like talking about manufacturing to upstream, downstream. All these are slowly forming together. I don't think it's rocket science, and many people out there are able to quantify this like systematically thanks to certain standards that people are putting out there. And I think it's very important for us to also work our way knowing where we currently are at, which means that we are measuring our baseline emissions. And from that point, we can slowly look towards our roadmap to our plans to decarbonization down the journey of our organization, which is something that is very meaningful and close to my heart. And yeah, and that drives my passion working in the organization like, on a day-to-day basis.
well, I think, we can all agree that circular practices add value and beyond environmental impact. Andy, you brought a couple of suggestions to the table around cost savings and smarter procurement and business opportunities as well around sort of a shared value initiative, which support our sort of sustainable requirements and goals. I think that there's a huge benefit now to the brand as well. Sustainability is a huge brand building exercise if done correctly, but there are risks around that. And we're seeing those risks on the international stage as well. So I think, as Shu Xin said, the approach of measuring and setting those baselines and understanding what the baseline is so that then you can make responsible adjustments and reductions is the right way to go.
I think it's key that the reporting of that carbon data doesn't become another greenwashing opportunity. I think it needs to be verified data. It needs to be, I think the companies that are producing that data really need to open that data up, allow external organizations to critically challenge that data to ensure that it's accurate, because we're trying to fix a problem here that shouldn't become an opportunity. That data needs to be the kind of the base stone of everything. The accuracy of that is absolutely critical.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that there are so many opportunities, as you say, to take it down a negative pathway. People are trying to measure and accurately disclose information about their businesses and practices. And then, of course, there are always, as there are within everything within the business or life, there are opportunistic ways for people to take advantage. So the standardization of certification and processes of, if you like, rubber stamping those calculations for me is absolutely critical, and it needs to be really tightened up. So we've kind of covered a little bit on an internal. I'd like to move external now and talk a bit more about the key stakeholders within our industry. So perhaps you guys can share a bit more about who are the key stakeholders within the industry we work in.
IFMA's Knowledge Library is the largest digital collection of quality content specific to the built environment, featuring hundreds of articles, case studies, research reports, videos, and templates. It has helped thousands of facility management professionals learn and leverage FM best practices. It's also 100% free to IFMA members. Visit knowledgelibrary.ifma.org to learn more.
Within the industry we work in, really the guys that drive the specification of product that goes into the offices that we work in, the architects and designers, they're at the forefront of what's new. They're at the forefront of materials, of sustainable materials, et cetera, et cetera. I know that a lot of them have got a huge passion for reuse, and the industry is really driving that change in terms of the building envelope. I think the building envelope provides one opportunity, but I think I read recently that a sustainably built building takes about 80 years to offset its carbon footprint from its initial building process. What can we hit regularly are the floors in that building. They're within our careers that we can make a difference every 3 years to the floors within the building. And there's a huge opportunity within those spaces to impact carbon footprint. Company driving to net zero, that is a big opportunity for them to do that.
And I think the strategy with that is really on like the 4 Rs, which starts with reuse, repurpose, recycle, and redistribution.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So that is something that is what we do at JEB Group and SOS, which is trying to help clients to sustainably manage their office furniture. And I think it's very relevant for the fact that it's something very tangible that you can see the item not going into the landfill just because it's no longer wanted, but the condition, the functions are all in good situation. So in this situation, we would try to donate the item to relevant NGOs so that they can put the item back into good use. And ultimately, the whole exercise is to avoid a functional piece of furniture going into the landfill for the sake that it's no longer wanted.
We're on the IFMA podcast. I think the biggest stakeholder in all of this is the client and the facilities manager. They're the teams that are on the ground able to drive that change up the chain within their business and down the chain into their supply chain. I think, they're the guys that are lovingly caring for these buildings and the product that's in them. I think they are critical to this change. And, the reuse of product starts with the correct procurement of the product in the first place. Design for reuse, procure for reuse, buy for reuse. Always have that in your mind. Have the end of life of the product in mind at the start of your journey with that product. And then, we're ultimately we're forward planning the solution effectively.
You nail on the head there. And I think we can move that forward now to think about, so how do we engage and ensure that those stakeholders are, one, informed, but also are taking those actions? How can we help to, if you like, educate or share what it is that we, one, are doing within our business, but also across the industry, that there are opportunities to take these circular practices into the built environment at the construction stage or design plan stage, construction stage, and then thereafter. Perhaps Shu Xin, have you any thoughts on education?
Yeah, I personally, I've seen that. I think case studies, or rather something that is pictorial or numerical, is something that is more easily to convince stakeholders, in the sense that they can potentially understand how the project or a building can potentially be sustainably transformed in various ways. Like, take the reuse, for example. Facility managers really see that the items that are in their space were unwanted furniture beforehand, but now putting into their new space, it's brilliantly nice and functional to use. And they can slowly, through these small little pilot projects, adopt how it actually works. And taking that back is also on like recycling the items, or potentially seeing actual situations where these items are functionally used in their space.
Fantastic. Yeah. Again, you're bringing up another point around IPMA, and which is so relevant. And the facilities manager, one thing that I saw time and time again in the environment, certainly in Hong Kong in my time there, where you would have different departments and procurement teams producing or procuring different items. So structure and standards within organizations, which often means that there's a different task chair for different levels from different brands, and they're all procuring differently. And at the end of life, when we get to that point where we then have to redistribute or to recycle or to repurpose those products, then you end up with a huge pile of different product. So it's a really interesting point to touch on, is that, how can we also link in with those stakeholders to ensure that, if the facilities manager was almost the front line through to the client to say, hey, we're seeing some procurement practices that against perhaps the overall company policy or their processes. I think that could be a good point as well. Andy, anything you wanted to share with us further on kind of collaborations, partnerships, and how we connect to clients and stakeholders to be able to help deliver more services to them?
I think it's early adoption, really. I think it's, the earlier we're involved in a process, the better the outcome of the process. It's not, cards on the table. It's not as fast as saying, hey, let's go and buy 100 chairs. The process, if you want to reuse, is one that there's a well-trodden path now, and it is systematic in its approach in the same way that procuring new furniture is. So it's not something to be frightened of as a process. But yeah, I think engaging early, we can bring so many test cases, over 300 projects where we've completely reused, zero to landfill projects where we've exited thousands upon thousands of desks and chairs from buildings and nothing's gone to landfill. It's totally achievable. We just need to be engaged on that journey and take that client on that journey, bring our learnings, our mistakes, our many rabbit holes that we've been down, and bring those to the table and just collaborate, be honest, be open, be transparent. At the end of the day, we're trying to make an exceptionally important change that has one of the biggest impacts that we could possibly ever make as a population.
Yeah, you touch on a really critical point there about the speed of change and the process of change as well. And I think also it can seem sometimes like such a huge item to break down, like you use the analogy around how do you eat an elephant and you take one bite at a time, that sort of approach. It is that, and I would encourage that. And certainly we've seen that being successful with clients and partnerships that we have on the ground, is that you build momentum through almost sometimes taking the small wins on projects or in initiatives that you put into the organization. It could be, that we're just looking to save, 10, 15, 20 items from a corporate. I think that's a really good start point, as you build momentum through participation and and from there, then you can start to see, okay, the wheels are turning and you can set some targets and road to make a larger impact, which is huge. Any other thoughts on stakeholders and engagement and how we might be able to impact or further encourage them to look at circularity, guys?
I mean, I personally believe that industry should, if possible, in particular, the big employers around the world, the multi-continent employers, the MNCs that are out there, they have a chance to maybe lobby government, maybe try and help government along the journey of what's important to them to, help industry make that change. Because, without that, we're a generation, we're a group of people that have got up every day and bought, it's a capitalist mentality and it's just how we've grown up. It's, just what we know. But that mentality has drawn monumental amounts of natural resources. So we need to think, if we don't have those natural resources, or if they're depleting and they're finite, what's our solution? Well, all of those materials exist in circulation. They're in buildings. They're your stock. They're your future stock within your estate. Think about that differently. Think about the carbon impact of that. Think about the financial impact of that. And then who can help you achieve it? It feels more simple than I'm sure it is in reality. But yeah, it's critical.
On the point of government, I think for Hong Kong and Singapore per se has been rather good in terms of we see policy changes towards mandating sustainability reporting. And with this coming along the way, more and more clients of ours are actually expecting us to get better at our impact reporting, which is something that is also very relevant to what we are doing, for the fact that we want to make the entire project very tangible and something very codable, so that they could potentially put it onto their own sustainability reporting, for their own marketing, for their own PR. It's something that needs this ecosystem to slowly spread the word, so that more and more people can see how this is done, or this can be done, so that more and more people can be part of this journey. And similar to the statistic of net zero goals, potentially at the very beginning there was not really a mandate, but because people see what other people are doing, more and more people are doing it. And the net zero goal, if you put it into a graph, is really exponential. So hopefully this is a circular economy, and how we view waste as a resource can be potentially be in that trend as well. And I hope that more and more people can adopt that kind of mentality, just like what we are doing and try to do on our day-to-day job.
Well said.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well done. I think that point's probably a nice time to sort of summarize and wrap up some of the discussion today. It's clear, obviously, the path to circular economy is without its challenges. We've touched on those points, but those challenges are obviously opportunities in disguise. And I think if we can shift our mindsets and embrace the value in what was once considered waste, we can obviously unlock new possibilities or new potential for sustainability in the built environment or industry. Furniture, as Andy, you so brilliantly put, furniture and fittings are often overlooked, and essentially the end of life process isn't really appreciated. We need to become key players. We need to become stars at being able to deliver those products back into the loop and create new products from them or reuse them in a different way. So the road ahead requires obviously collaboration, innovation, lots of commitment and change. We need to work with stakeholders. We need to shout loudly. We need to be clear that we need support from those MNCs, from governance, from finance, to ensure that everybody's part of the solution, rather than putting pressure on individual or smaller businesses. So big thanks for joining us today on this journey towards circularity. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast and the episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And feel free to reach out to any of us on our social media channels. And perhaps until next time, remember, your waste is your resource. And if you can shift your mindset and look at waste differently, perhaps those around you might be also able to see the value.
Thanks for tuning in to the Connected FM podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the show, because it really helps us reach more listeners just like you. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. See you next time.